Welcome to today's Harvard Business Review webinar. You can't collaborate unless you agree on the problem. I'm Angela Herron, editor for research and special projects at HBR, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I also want to thank Google for work for making this discussion possible. We really want this to be an interactive webinar, so if you have questions or comments at any time, just type your message in the chat box in the lower left corner of your screen. To download a copy of today's presentation, click on the resources icon in the lower left corner of your screen. And if you need help at any time during the presentation, click on that help icon in the lower right corner. We also have a conversation going on at Twitter. You can find us at HBR Exchange and use the hashtag HBR Webinar. Everyone in business today is talking about collaboration. Leaders know they need to break down silos so that people can work together and innovate across the organization. And executives in both B2C and B2B companies know they need to collaborate externally with those customers and their partners to co-create new products and solutions. It sounds like a great ambition, but despite high expectations and investments of some time and resources, collaborations, particularly in the B2B space, often fail to yield the intended results. Today, Alessandro de Fiore and Mark Friedman of ECSI Consulting are with us to talk about why collaborations fail and how collaborators can achieve alignment in solving critical business problems. Alessandro de Fiore is the founder and CEO of the European Center for Strategic Innovation at ECSI Consulting. He has 22 years of experience in management consulting across many international companies. Mark Friedman is partner and managing director of the Americas for ECSI. He has over 2 decades of experience advising public corporations and private companies in the U.S. and Europe on managing change and improving profitable growth and performance. Alessandro, Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, thank you.
You know, as I mentioned in the introduction, there's a lot of buzz about collaboration. Is this because organizations have gotten worse at it? Or is it more tied to the changing nature of our work and how we need to get things done, not on an assembly line or in discrete tasks?
No, I think the big problem here is the challenges of today's businesses are such that cannot be solved only internally, and they require a new form of collaboration for innovation. And this is what we will focus in the next 45 minutes or so of the webinar. Is really about, you want to go through a process of collaborating with customers, suppliers, potential partners, other stakeholders in the value chain, look for innovations and helping them to shape the outcome of your innovation process. This is what will be really the big problem we are trying to address in the next 45 minutes.
So are you saying that the problem lies with people, not with technology?
All right, yeah, we're talking about collaboration, is about trust, is about intimacy, is about having 2 value chains, particularly in the B2B, to speak together and work together to a better outcome in terms of innovation. So it's about people, it's about organizational development. And it's also sometimes about technology, but it's one of the elements and enablers, but people is key.
So let me just ask you to take us through your framework and how you think about this whole idea of innovation and co-creation.
All right, thank you. So let me, first of all, a brief introduction to what we mean for co-creation, because co-creation is this collaborative process of innovation in both B2B and B2B, but most of our presentation and cases will be focusing on B2B. You can actually co-create with a number of different players. You can go for customers, suppliers, or you can go for partners. You can also collaborate and co-create with value chain players, for example, dealers or distributors, or with general stakeholders. So really the first question is, how do you pick the target of your co-creation and collaboration? Who is the right target? And based on our experience, there are 2 main criteria or 2 main factors. The first one is the challenge you want to address. And the second is the structure of your value chain. The challenge is pretty straightforward. So if you have, for example, a technology platform, you're looking for applications of your own technology platforms, very likely you will look to select one or few customers you want to collaborate with. On the contrary, if you're challenge is about looking for innovative ways to increase the service level at the point of sales. Likely your target will be a dealer or a distributor. So the challenge is the first criteria. The second one is really the value chain structure. Let me make an example around suppliers. Suppliers can be a potential element in the innovation outcome in some industries. In others, not at all. In the wine industry, if you're running a winery, your suppliers are the cork suppliers or the bottle supplier. So what's the point of, or what's the potential impact of suppliers in terms of innovation? On the contrary, in other industries like consumer electronics or automotive, obviously they are critical for your innovation outcome. So the value chain structure is obviously the second factor in the way you choose what co-creation partner you are looking for. So this is the first critical question in collaboration and co-creation. The second one is really why. Why we need to do this? What are the benefits? And based on our research and experiences, we really can summarize the benefits in 4 types of benefits. The first one is about knowledge, cost, innovation, risk, and trust. So knowledge is, you can get a better and more in-depth knowledge of customer and consumer needs through collaboration processes, because you really understand that you explore in the context of use. Second is about marketing and market research budget. You can reduce dramatically your market research because you are developing the concept, you developing the prototype and testing together with some of your customers or key players in the value chain in the context of use. So you are reducing the costs and eventually also creating the buzz and the pre-acceptance in terms of marketability. As a consequence, also the risk of innovation is going down, because you are developing something which is already fitting the needs of your co-creators and your customers. And last but not least, particularly in B2B, we see that you can improve trust and relationships through these processes, because you can increase the intimacy, you can work with them through results and walk the talk. So intimacy and reliability are the 2 pillars of a better trust. And we have seen more and more companies embracing co-creation as a key element of their innovation processes. There are some very well-known examples, so like Starbucks with the My Starbucks ideas in B2C, or P&G with the Connect and Develop, and many companies, and more, they're looking at this like an institutional capability to bring inside the walls of the organization.
Alessandro, can you tell us a little more about that? I mean, this is a major challenge, and yes, they can take this as an event to deal with a specific problem, but you highlight at the end there the opportunity to create an institutional capability. Can you give us a more poignant example?
Oh, this is if I look for our experience in consulting, it can be that a company, it gets to you with a very clear idea about, we want to develop a co-creation capability. And we have a few cases later on in the presentation. Or it can be that a company is just, even by accident, experimenting something which is collaboration for innovation and co-creation. And this is the case I'm going to present, which is a less known case than Starbucks and P&G, but it's a fantastic case. It's about commodity business, first of all. It's a cement. What is more commodity than cement? It's a gray. It's a gray powder. And we have this Italian headquarter multinational in cement. The name is Italcementi. It's a 4 billion company. And they got into this idea of transforming cement, maybe because they are coming from the Italian heritage, transforming cement in something that architecturally is beautiful. And they are doing this with architects who are rock stars. We call them archistars. Architects who are so famous in the world that with their landmark projects, they can influence the mass of architects and real estate developers. So they say, okay, those are our co-creation partners. And they were targeting architects. And all started with Richard Meyer, the famous American contemporary architect. And Richard got a commission landmark project from the Vatican in Rome. And you can see from this beautiful picture is the Church of Dives in Misericordia. And Richard is using white cement surfaces. So he was looking for a cement that was white, brilliant white. It could stay for years, brilliant white. And this is the issue of many cities, because with the pollution, cement after a few months gets gray. So he ended up by accident with Italcementi. They were developing in the lab a new cement which the characteristic of be self-cleaning and keeping this brilliant white for years. But they never developed it. It was in the lab, and they started to co-develop and co-innovate with Richard for the Church of Divina Misericordia, and that was the real application. And through that application, this was a landmark. You can see the benefit for Italcementi. It was co-paid, co-developed, also the splash and the hoopla of a landmark for the mass of architect. And so they got this first case, and they say, wow, there is a huge value here. And they started to institutionalize this, and they've done more and more times. And there is another fantastic example with the architect Giampaolo Imbrichi for the pavilion at the Shanghai 2012 Expo, where they used a material called the transparent cement, which is a mixed material of a cement and resins, and is you can have light inside and outside. It's also more sustainable, and you can see the effect in the night in the picture where you have lights from inside coming outside, and during the daylight, is obviously also more sustainable because you need less energy consumption for air conditioning. And this is a case. They started with by accident with Richard Meyer. They saw the example and the case for value, and they said, no, we want to do more and more. And the way they did it, they built a capability inside the corporation in an institutional way.
So wait, I have to pause there. So in other words, they actually said, wait a minute, we need a framework around this? Because, I mean,
Right.
it's a striking example of where you had a chance to change a relationship where normally the architect designed and then you get the order to go do it. So but these seem like very one-off opportunities. So is it possible you can actually make this an ongoing, replicable habit?
That's what they are doing. They are doing ongoing, and as we speak, there is another, for example, Archistar collaboration for the Expo in Milan that just opened in the 2015 Expo in Milan, where the pavilion of Milan, the Italian pavilion, is with a cement which is called biodynamic. It's 3 times more fluid and is 2 times more resistant to flexibility. So they build panels with a unique shape that they resemble an intricate forest. They will not be possible with a normal cement. You will think about cement, flat surface. So they are doing on, and they are using this approach. We call it a co-creation wheel that you can see on this slide. And in a way, they can institutionalize the capability and becoming a platform for ongoing innovations and co-creations in the company. So clearly articulated the target. So the contributors is the rockstar architects when they have a commission landmark. And so in a proactive way, they scout for them. Now, they don't expect anymore Richard Meyer reaching them and say, I have this problem, can you solve it? Second, they built a platform. In B2B, is less technology platform like in B2C, where you want to pick the wisdom of the crowd in co-creation, right? And it becomes even crowdsourcing, yeah? So in this case, the platform is a physical space. In the research and development lab of Italcementi, it's a physical space where architects from all around the world, they come, visit, understand technology, they have a space to work together with the senior R&D people of Italcementi. Third, interactions. No, those rockstar architects are celebrities. And you know how to manage a celebrity is not an easy job, particularly for a research and development, a senior member. So they mapped the experience cycle, all the touch points, and they were training the senior and the people how to pamper, how to deal with those celebrities during the process of a co-creation.
This sounds like they had to know how to put blue M&Ms in the right bowls.
That's right. That's right. It's, and then last but not least, as a magnet, they clearly articulated for the architects the value for them. They can, no, this is all about social recognition. You develop, you use a new material, you push the architectural innovation level, and this is about social recognition for the architect. On the other side, there is also value for i talciamenti. So you can see they get paid part of the development cost because there is a landmark commission. They got reduced the marketing costs thanks to the splash of a landmark project coming on the world, and the general public and the mass of architects are looking at it, and they are looking also to those very famous architects. They say, wow, maybe this is a material I can use for more mass application. So they're reducing dramatically also the marketing costs thanks to this. And financially, the company is getting better and better. In the last 3 years, Europe, from a macroeconomic standpoint, has not been, let's say, very positive. And so the revenues have been flat or slightly decreasing, but the EBITDA margin have been increasing. And the percentage of this category of cement, they call special cement, has been growing from 2% to 7% in 3 years, and they want to hit the target of 20% by 2018. So that's financially. And this is a great case because it's commodity, and even in commodity, co-creation has a huge potential to make you different and differentiate.
I have to say, as you pointed out, concrete is not very glamorous, but the projects you're describing are very glamorous, and certainly the intersection of their work together really is focused, has to be focused on innovation. But do you have examples of other companies who have sort of attacked this problem and used a similar approach?
Well, let me speak to a slightly different example on an even larger scale. That was a great example of how a co-creation capability can be born out of a co-creation project. Let me turn the cycle to BASF, the giant German chemical company, global chemical company, who took a little bit different approach that's really unique. And I can't help but smile when I talk about it because it really is a fundamental difference. As part of its 150th anniversary, BASF is going to discuss from a historical view how their chemistry has changed and impacted the world. But that's the historic view. They're also looking forward to how they'll grow and change the world, looking toward the future. And they set out to create a co-creation capability to help define that future. And it started with the creation of what they're calling the creator space. And that is the landmark, if you will, an institute to help them with this as an institutional capability. From there, they focused on methodologies. Now, mind you, this is before the project work. They focused on selecting 7 different methodologies that they can use in different situations for different types of partners, whether internally or externally across the value chain, all the way to the end consumer. Suppliers, partners, distributors, throughout the whole gamut, regionally, globally, across all the business units. To develop a capability to do this on a continuous basis. So they start with 7 methodologies that they can choose which is the right one for the right situation.
Are you talking about this is kind of a framework you put on top of analyzing a problem?
It's a framework for how to go pursue a potential co-creation opportunity. Okay. And as Alessandro said in the beginning, those co-creation needs are a reflection of the complexity of what it takes to bring innovation to the world. Right? So from those selection of 7 methodologies, they then set out to codify them in the form of handbooks. Think about those handbooks as a practitioner's guidebook. It doesn't answer every little question. It's not a paint-by-numbers kit, but it helps give that baseline of knowledge to a future set, and a current set actually, of practitioners in these different methodologies. That was supported with action learning trainings and interactive webinars, as well as some professional support to help build an institutional capability to go forward to explore co-creation opportunities that have that definition of innovation and growth that they want to pursue. It was at this point that they then looked at co-creation opportunities. So first they built the space, the capability, institutionalized it. Now they're able to pursue opportunities, but not 1 or 2, but many at once. And from a selection process, they started with a selection of 35 potential projects that they could use these 7 methodologies to work across company lines and collaborate to determine what are real opportunities to pursue. And these opportunities span the entire $74 billion organization.
So give us a couple of examples.
There's a few in the agricultural sector. There's few in the paint area, looking in the automotive sector. There are a number, not many of which I can necessarily talk about now, but it spans their whole organization, which is incredibly diverse, globally, regionally, and across business units.
And also, maybe also for the different potential stakeholder you can co-create. So there are initiatives with the suppliers, initiatives of co-creation with the business partners, initiatives with the scientific community, obviously several with the customers. So no, you can co-create in the introduction with different players according to the challenge. And different formats and also the 35 projects, they are for different stakeholders in a way that this is about learning how you co-create in the different situations, contexts, co-creation partners, and challenge types. And it's really about building a capability in a 74 billion euro company and 100,000 plus employees. So it's a very sophisticated architecture about learning and institutionalizing the co-creation.
And it's not just co-creation for the sake of co-creation. These projects will then go through a selection process for seed funding of taking it to the next stage across the organization.
Before it's a full...
Before it's a full investment in the next stages. And as Alessandro said, they've not only covered their whole business, but they covered their connection points across the entire value chain, across these 35 projects.
Someone is asking, go a little deeper on how they choose what they're going to work on. I mean, how do you identify opportunity? Or is it, hearkening back to the title of this webinar, that they choose certain problems they want to solve where they think there's opportunity?
But maybe in this case it was a combination of two factors. The first one is obviously challenges which are relevant for the business. But no, this is also a learning exercise. So it's a stage one or step one of building a capability in the organization. So we were balancing this criteria with the second criteria that we wanted to have coverage in the different regions. We wanted to have coverage on the different co-creation partners and in some of the different type of businesses. Some are more upstream or downstream in chemicals. So we wanted also spread this in the different levels and applications of the organization, because it was also an initial step of learning about this capability. So they were both. But no, if you don't have the learning factor, obviously it's the challenge and the priority in terms of business which is driving your choice. Yeah?
And somebody else was actually caught by the fact you talked about it being in different levels of the organization, and a lot of people got training. So in other words, there's not a separate R&D unit that went outside or set aside. How was the message throughout the organization?
There are folks within the business units themselves that are working on this, partnered with expertise in the methodologies. And you bring those two pieces together, and that makes sure you have both the process expertise and the content expertise. It's partnered internally and it's shared externally with your co-creation partner. And there's not an expectation that all 35 of these projects will go forward. Some of these will learn that, no, this is not the right thing to pursue, but what a great opportunity, and with your partner, let's try this one next and see what might be there. Because it creates a conversation, a dialogue, and a discussion about innovation and growth that's bigger than one organization. It strengthens the ties of partnerships as you go through the process as well. That too is a learning point that both organizations, or all the organizations, get to have as they go through it.
And one build is, to our knowledge, this is probably one of the most sophisticated and articulated learning program on co-creation in multinationals that we know. And what struck me as brilliant, and that's why I admire this company, is they use the 150 years anniversary and the positive energy in the organization to start a change journey. So it's like, when you have a crisis, they use the need for change for facilitating change management. And here is the positive energy which is used for making a change. And the positive energy is coming from the 150 celebration, which is obviously creating a buzz in the overall ecosystem inside, but also in the ecosystem of such a giant organization. And this is fantastic because usually when you have the 100, the 150 year celebrations, what the companies do, they just throw a big party. And this is really about rejuvenating and using this energy to rejuvenate. And I think this is brilliant.
Well, what you've just described sounds like business nirvana. It sounds like everybody, of course, would want to do it, and it sounds like how could you fail? So we know that a lot of people don't do a very good job at this. What gets in the way?
Well, we love to talk about the projects that succeed. It's a better story. It's a happier ending. But there are great lessons learned from the projects that don't go quite exactly the way we would like. And what I'd like to do is talk about 5 major risk factors that have to be managed. The first of which, the title of our session today, is the most critical and the most important. But the remaining 4 are also critical to success. So let's really explore that first one, the challenge of an improper problem definition or challenge statement as it relates to co-creation. And it's this issue of co-definition, right? The first and most significant way this is presented is bias. So well-intentioned company, I go to my partner and say, I want your help in working on this problem. The challenge is, that's my problem. It may not be your problem. It may not be a shared problem. And while it's great to have that partner help you solve it, there may not be a win for both sides. Now, bias is not inherently bad. Bias just needs to be agreed to. But we need to be conscious of the fact that there needs to be something in it for all parties, more than just, I get, you give, right? The second area where there's a challenge on the problem statement is something that we call the Crayola problem. Let me explain. We all are familiar with that 128 crayon box of crayons. I can put it in a table surrounded by 10 people and say, everybody get a red crayon. We can all reach and figure out, and we find a shade of red that we're generally pretty happy about. But there's only one red crayon. And only one person may or may not have it, because there may be 20 different shades. Think of those different shades of crayon as a slightly different understanding of the problem statement, right? So I think I have red, I'm thinking red, but I'm actually solving a somewhat varied problem. Now, in the joint sessions themselves, that's okay. We manage that through discussion and interaction. But what happens when those 2 different organizations that each have 10 people around the table bringing different skills and different expertise leave the meeting? All of a sudden, they're going back to divide and conquer across the work plan, and they're working on slightly different problems. So that alignment problem presents significant risk to the success. So co-defining that problem is critical, making sure that you deal with these issues of bias and alignment. So let me give you an example. I'll have to change the name of the company. We'll call it Whiteco. Whiteco is a parts supplier to the white goods industry. The white good industry is, think home appliances, refrigerators, freezers, dishwashers, washers, dryers, and so forth. They took great care to organize a spectacular workshop. They had done all of their preparation work. They put huge efforts convincing a key customer to participate. They had a well-defined problem statement. They picked a location designed to encourage imagination and exploration. They included the right resources, experts from both organizations, decision-making authority. They brought a top-flight facilitator in to make sure that the process went smoothly. And the workshop flopped. Well, the issue turned out that they had chosen was an example of this bias issue. It was a problem statement that was of great importance to Whiteco, but not so much to their customer. So as the process unfolded, the customer became disengaged because they were constantly giving, but there was nothing they were really getting out of the process. Now, to try to correct that process, Whiteco went to the equal and opposite challenge and changed to a problem statement of great interest to the customer. Well, then their people disengaged. So managing that issue of bias is critically important, and then also focusing on that issue of alignment. Okay? The second risk is a belief that it's just an event. I'm going to bring everybody together, I'm going to have this incredible workshop, and it's going to be successful.
In other words, we've just uncovered the problem, and thus now we don't have to, because we can all go back now and just fix it for our individual organizations. So you never have to work going forward.
We can cover it in one session, we're good. We can divide, everybody's going to send in their PowerPoint presentations, we're good, right? But it's not an event. It's a process. And we look at that process in 3 stages. The preparation stage, which is most critical, we just talked about, creating a crisp, clear definition and concise definition of the problem statement. So that's the preparation phase. It's also to make sure that there's clear understanding of what that problem means for the organization. The second piece is execution. Now, a great idea, poorly executed, we know those challenges. So that's where you need to understand, what was the discussion? What were the decisions made? How were they made? How was that captured? How was that communicated? So that alignment happens over time, and we keep moving forward and not reopening those same discussions as we go through the process.
Now, is this the stage that you're also setting up expectations about how long this is going to take?
Absolutely. We had that crisp problem statement, and now we're talking about execution, and it's not just how long it's going to take. What are the resource requirements of that? And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. That stage is follow-up. We need to make sure that ongoing follow-up happens, that it's an iterative process with constant connection and reconnection to make sure we move forward and collaborate. The point you brought up is the third risk, and that's the issue of resource commitment. So we've all been part of that project, right, where it's the people that were most easily spared and readily available to participate. Well, that's great enthusiasm. It may not be the people with the expertise or the decision-making authority to really focus on the problem at hand and make sure that the right answers come to light as opposed to a politically correct process. That's also where we need to make sure that we understand what the workload is on these folks. Because somebody that's already overcommitted, they may be the right person, have the right skills, have the right authority, but they may not have time to work on it. So it gets handed off to someone else in the organization. You're back to that alignment problem with the wrong red crayon.
Right. At this point, I see the unit head going, oh, God.
Not again.
They're taking my best people.
Exactly right. So, having the right resources and having the right commitment and the right understanding of what that workload is, so we can have the right resources around the table, but also so the home organization understands the value of that individual's time and why it's important they participate is critical for that ongoing co-creation process that takes place during the execution of the project. The fourth challenge we see is postponement of those critical intellectual property discussions and the rules. The key for success in co-creation is an open and honest dialogue, exchange of ideas, exchange of knowledge. If those discussions haven't taken place, you find that traditional, closed mouth all of a sudden, and they can't finish their sentence in the discussion, or the memo is somewhat cryptic, or there's a lot of hedging of what's going on and ambiguity in what's done. You have to be able to share those things. It's not a problem that they're intellectual property issues. Just talk about them in advance. Talk about what they are or what they could be. How will you deal with those problems when they surface? How will decisions be made? What's the if you will, the SLA for how fast those decisions get made so they can continue to progress?
So, and maybe here, on the IP is good to share an example. So this is important to clear before the workshop or before the co-creation session. And you cannot sign a detailed agreement on IP because you really don't know what is coming out from the creative collaborative session or workshop. But you can certainly do something. You can set very simple principles on how you're going to deal with them in terms of IP. And also to put them in writing. For example, we had a client in the automotive industry in Europe, a German automaker that was going through a co-creation process with one of its suppliers. And they agreed before the session on a couple of principles. Principle number one, the ownership of a new technology developed by the supplier obviously is ownership of the supplier in terms of IP. But the use of a new technology which is coming through that process where I participated as an automaker, I have an exclusivity for 18 months. I will be the first to use. in the market. So is an example. 2 simple principles in writing before coming to the workshop session. This is clear, and then the more complex, articulated, law-oriented kind of agreements you can do afterward, when you really know what is coming out, what are the ideas, where you're creating task force, joint task force.
Wow, it's kind of like a prenup that you're developing along the way.
Right.
A good outline structure of
A
one,
good outline
nonetheless.
structure.
It's 8 months, 6-8 months in our experience before you actually enter in the sessions where you do the creative workshop. So 6-8 months of a preparation, this is our best practice that we see to work. Because no, you want to co-define the problem statement, set this up in terms of governance and resources, clear the IP. You want to have all the people from the 2 value chains to speak in terms of experts, and then you go, and then also you have the execution path, which is clear afterward.
And the last risk to manage is communication. You know, you said in the very beginning, so it's a people issue. Yes, it's a people issue. And the communication is key. It has to be ongoing. That's the check and balance to make sure things are moving in the right direction and everybody's aligned, decision-making's working, and the right people are involved. It's communication within the team. It's communication up the respective organizations to the sponsors, constantly setting and clarifying expectation and progress and position, as well as to outside parties. Because you may have 2 primary participants, you may have 2, 5, 10 periphery participants in there that are critical for this as well. Communication is absolutely critical, and that's a people issue. To step back, you know, we talked about that first problem statement, that issue of co-defining the challenge that you're trying to work on, so that your co-creation exercise, your collaboration effort is fruitful. And what we'd like to share with you is a 3-step process for doing that really well, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, a number of people are asking if you can talk a little bit about how to get this into focus.
Step 1, think in terms of an iterative process. It may start internally with just your organization, where you really have to think in terms of who is that potential partner? What are the issues that they may be having? Are they shared issues? What would good look like to them? What's the type of problem statement that has enough, if you will, gravitas for them to engage in and contribute the right resources? So understand it from their perspective, right? Go through that process. Select that target customer you want to work with. Present your ideas to them, not as a final answer, but as input into a discussion. Ask them to do the same. Invite them to add, change, delete, create a whole new problem statement, taking that same iterative process internally. Come back and ask them to bring that counterproposal for discussion. Now, as part of that discussion, you want to step back in step 2, the ability to rank those potential different problem statements. You're not each going to come with one armed for battle for yours to win. The idea is that it in and of itself is a co-creation session on co-defining the problem. So you're asking them to bring a few different variations of that problem statement, why they think it's important, what their thinking is, what the rationale is, and agree on a set of scoring criteria and invite them to score those problem statements in advance. You'll do the same. Come back for a very meaningful, content-rich discussion about the conclusions you came to, and then do it together. Score them individually, but come back, score them together, and then rank the top voted ones and see which ones are, on a shared basis, the most critical and the most important. Step 3 is to jointly select not 1, but 2 or 3 problem statements. Think about it. You go in, armed for the teeth, you go through this whole process, you select one, you're 5 months into the preparation for all the work, and you realize it's completely infeasible. That's not going to be a good day for anybody involved. So you select 2 or 3 as a bit of a hedge on that risk, but also because it may be that one is more opportunistic to pursue or a better choice to pursue for any of a variety of reasons, whether, financial ability, resource availability, or other causes. So you have a choice to work on, and all that good work moves forward across one or possibly more of the problem statements you've defined. Work those problem statements. Make sure they're clear and concise. Make sure that there's a shared understanding, and make sure that you've dealt with the bias issues, understand what the intellectual property issues, understand what those resource issues are. But again, it goes back to that first problem statement. Make sure you have great clarity on defining that problem statement. And one of the challenges with doing that is you end up with the, we call them the tomes of, here's our problem statement, all 500 pages of it. But it doesn't need to be that complex. Alessandro, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and actually, we wrote a few months ago a HBR blog on how to craft a 15 words strategy statement. So it was about strategy. But no, the same principles apply for writing and summarizing the problem statements. So 15 words, it means brief. When you are putting a constraint to people to summarize complex thinking in few words, fundamentally you create alignment. Because on every single word will be picked and developed in a way that everybody will get aligned. If you think about a 100 pages document, everybody can read what he wants. So you have one document, maybe hundreds or tens of different interpretations. So you want to be short, define what you want to do, create alignment, also what you don't want to do or what you don't want to explore, and clarity in the sentence and in the articulation. So writing the problem statement is another core skills. So when we develop a co-creation skills in the organizations, writing and articulating the problem statements, which means the right question, is a core skill that we always recommend organizations to work for the people. And let me go and let me close this also to say that obviously you understand from the presentation we are very passionate on co-creation. We really see the benefits. We have seen the benefits, and we do recommend that this is not a single project, but you build in your organizational capability. So if you want to build a capability, then you need a journey, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. And this is a very simple tool that we have been using. We call it roadmap. There are two dimensions. One is a dimension of time, so the different phases and milestones that you achieve in the journey, in the change journey. And the second is a dimension of levers or axes for changes. In these specific examples, the levers were processes, obviously not all the processes, but processes which are related to co-creation, like innovation process, but also in this specific case, there was a consumer goods company, the key account manager process, which has a component, obviously, of interaction with big distributors and supermarket chains. Then skills, so you need to instill and develop in the organizations the right skills in the right target groups, so your employees. Organizational home, which means who is going to be the architect inside the company of this capability and develop and nourish over time. And then even if you do 1, 2, and 3 process skills and the organizational home, and you have an internal environment which is unfriendly to innovation, we're not going too far. So in parallel, this company was going to work or has been also addressing the internal environment. So the culture and the leadership behaviors, they could be more supportive of innovation. But this is a very simple visual tool that helps you to design how to move from the as-is to the future state in terms of making a capability of co-creation institutional and part of the genetic code of your organization.
So we've got a lot of questions coming in. I want to remind people that if you have a question, just type it in the chat box and send it in. A lot of people are asking you to talk a little bit longer about how you do train people to be ready for this process. You mentioned that in one of the organizations they actually did some prep. And is it training in how to work with other people? Is it training in working with a particular company? What do you mean by that?
The training means developing skills and we have a couple of critical success factors that if you're in a large organization, so you want to train, and we're talking about thousands of people. So first of all, you want to look to something which is scalable. And so it's a combination of a training in class, but it's also, we mentioned handbooks in the case of a BSF. Handbooks is something very simple to read, understand, and apply. And is a key element for scalability. No, we don't want to see the hundreds of pages of a manual with a font 10 and hundreds of different tools and nobody is using. So pick only few and select and make them very easy to understand and very easy to apply. And go through handbooks, webinars, which are scalable, and also some training in class. The training in class is with the innovation teams, so the co-creation teams. So if you have a co-creation initiative, which is starting, that's the team you want to have in class. And we do suggest, based on our experience, you do training, but you do action training. So you do the theory, the methods, the tips, but immediately then apply those tips and methods and tools on the business issue, on the challenge you're going to address, and the team gets started.
Okay, so people are asking for a little more examples, so take it apart for us.
So take an example of one problem statement we're working on. I won't tell the problem statement, but I can explain the process. There's an individual that has gone through the training that has developed an expertise in the co-creation methodology in use. But there's also content experts that own the problem that are also involved in that. You're not going to, Alessandro said, this is not going to result in a paint by numbers, but an understanding of the framework, the architecture of the methodology, so that they can deploy it and understand there's things they don't know that are going to enter the process. You have both process expertise as well as content expertise and ownership of the problem, both familiar with the methodology in play. So both can instill confidence in the partner they're taking through this as it embarks. And when Alessandro said action learning, you can watch, you can then do it with some supervision, then you can be observed. You create a portfolio of experts which become an institutional capability that can be deployed and redeployed over time. So the content expert on initiative 1 may become the process expert on initiative 2.
Very similar. Another example, when you do co-creation with customers, before, jointly, there is a training session. What do we mean for co-creation? What's the process of a customer co-creation? What is the agenda we are going to use in the creative session? Is this the facilitation outline that we are planning to use? Any build? So it's actually training, but also setting the agenda up and getting alignment through training, getting learning, but also start the actions.
Have you seen people take this methodology into an internal exercise in solving problems?
Yeah, we have been focusing those 45 minutes on external co-creation. There is also an internal co-creation. You can actually co-create with your employee and use your employee on innovation or for problem solving. So absolutely, you can use technology platforms which are more internal crowdsourcing, but also you can do jamming sessions, which are co-creation sessions for internal employees, so different methods or according to the challenges. So the answer is absolutely yes. We also have done something very fancy. We happen has to be involved in a co-creation exercise with politicians at the EU, and talking about regulation issues, and we were trying to involve them in a more kind of a jamming setting, rebalanced kind of a setting, but so it's a very flexible mindset, if you wish, more than a technique.
But what I have to ask, how did that go? Were the politicians willing to kind of go into this spirit?
It was successful. It was. They enjoyed. I don't know if the change will come or will come considering the time horizons of the EU. We will see. We need a second life to see. But the outcome and again the trust at the end of the session was improved, and the outcome was great in terms of ideas. Yeah.
And the whole principle is there's not an us and them in the process. It's us versus them. It's a we. You've got a shared problem statement, a shared understanding. Both of you have an impact that you will feel positive to drive your organization. So you don't have that inherent problem of it's my problem, it's your problem. It's our problem, and we're trying to solve it.
But having said that, people, two companies coming together, or even two politicians, have both come with power and a need for income. So have you found that particularly it's difficult to get over those two problems? And particularly, have you ever found an issue where, in the end, the IP broke down the process, the debate over IP?
No, I think, no, those are the key reasons they fail. No, we have seen from the presentation of Mark, is really about all these 6-8 months that I mentioned before of a preparation are critical to reduce or eliminate this risk. So the IP, you need to talk and clear in advance. You need to agree on and codify the problem statements. So when you have a problem statement which is aligned, is a win-win if you find a solution. Going through the process of preparation, which is so intense, will also get alignment, trust, before you enter in the session. So this preparation phase is critical in the process and will help to reduce or even eliminate to zero some of those risks. We have seen so many companies that jump into the co-creation workshop with a limited preparation and thinking it's just an event and just failing. And they keep saying they do co-creation, and they don't understand it's a mindset, it's a process, it's a lot of work, it's discipline, it's technique, but it's also a way of approaching the external world. And it's much more than having a good facilitator, fundamentally.
So that 3-step process of brainstorming, scoring, and selection is designed to create an interactive process to manage those 5 risks. So by following that process, you're constantly looking at not just the problem definition, but the other factors that will influence its success, so that the outcome of the 2 to 3 that you decide to work on is positioned to succeed. All the ingredients are there, if it's a feasible solution out there.
Whether it's internal or external, this process obviously takes a big commitment of time and of resources. So that means, doesn't it, that you need a great deal of commitment from senior leadership, which then follows the question, then once the process started, how much does senior leadership need to be involved in controlling this process?
I think you need a commitment. That's for sure is one of those efforts that you really need to have the top management backing it. And the involvement. We always say that if you're doing with your number one customer a co-creation process, you really want to have the top management there during the session from both companies. Now, when we manage to deliver the message and be listened, and also the top management, the senior management is sitting at us in these sessions, you just see that it's not the procurement and the salesman or the technical guy on one side, the technical guy on the other side. They are the two companies and the two organizations which don't interact as a value chains. And that time is a good investment for CEOs and for senior management. And it's also a great behavior as example that you are sending a message to the organization, you are behind that. So it's good for return on customers, but it's also good for delivering the right message in the organization. This is where the company wants to go. So it is certainly a key requirement. How much time he wants to spend in those co-creation sessions is really up to the CEO or the senior management call. We do recommend they get involved, at least some of them.
I want to elaborate on that and also connect it to the very first question you asked, which was, by nature of spanning an organization, these are the big problems. These are the complex problems. It makes them the important problems. So senior management, it's not, will you participate in the session? It's try to keep them out of it, because they own the problem. They own the fundamental risk inherent behind the problem that's trying to be solved. So having them there, they understand it's part of their success and their organization's success, because they're looking organizationally, not so much personally. That is the nature of the problems that you're doing this with. It's not the small ones, it's the bigger ones.
I can also share one case. This is is another chemical company. It's not BASF, without mentioning the name. Is in the surfactants business. The CEO started this co-creation process, and they wanted to transform the company from technology push to more outside inside. R&D was a big issue. Yeah? And so the CEO is sending a letter to the head, the VP and head of research and development to say you should go to this co-creation workshop with this very important client. It was a consumer goods company using surfactants for their detergents. And the R&D got there and they said, no, this is a waste of time, and it was transformed in a 2 days workshop. The R&D was the first time listening to a customer so in depth, understanding the process, and it was an individual transformation. So it was the other way around, using this program also to have individual stories or individual transformations as a part of the change management program. But in this case, the CEO was behind it. He knew what was the issue in that function with a few people, and they say, no, personal letter, I do recommend you to participate. They were coming, they were skeptical. We turned them around, and they became sponsor of the program. Much easier to have R&D people behind instead of not having those kind of initiatives. Yeah.
Well, someone points out this is probably a good idea to have the senior management involved, because what comes out of these sessions could, in fact, be what transforms your organization, and transforming organizations is really hard. Which kind of leads me to my next question, which somebody asked, isn't this a process that would be easier to do in smaller companies that don't have a lot of moving parts to move around? But bringing big company and big company together, isn't that inherently a problem of elephant bumping?
It's more complex, but it's not necessarily harder.
Why do you say that?
If you have to align all the same factors, the difference is it just spans more people, right? So you still need senior management commitment in a small organization or a large organization. The difference is that might be a lot more people than in the small, family-owned, business that, just one individual is running things. So it's the same basic steps and the same basic process. It may take a little more time. You may have to touch more people in the process. Create an institutional capability, for example, may be a broader exercise than getting 3 people up and trained. But it's the same basic structure. It just scales to the organization that's at hand. But the outcomes are going to be scaled as well. The benefits are going to be scaled as well. And the nature of risk, they look at risk at a different scale. So what's a $1,000 risk for a very small company may be a $500 million risk for another company. So the trade-offs are similar when you look at it relative to that scale.
But it might be a model, someone points out, for a promising startup to work with a bigger company, because the two are actually going to solve a problem together.
Absolutely.
Someone else asked, you mentioned Starbucks at the beginning, but they didn't know what you were talking about. So can you talk about what was the open collaboration?
Yes, Starbucks has been going for years with a program called My Starbucks Idea. .com is on their website. We are in B2C, and we are not in B2B, so we've been covering a lot of B2B. In B2C, you can use your users and your community to generate ideas and insights that then you can actually take into your innovation process. And that's what Starbucks has been doing for many years with a technology platform, collecting ideas from their users and consumers, and then actually executing the best ideas in their both product configuration and also service level and experience configuration. And it's been extremely successful for many years. Yeah.
Even outlet design, like the design of the retail store itself.
Well, it's interesting. It does tie back to something you said earlier, which is that both groups at the table need to know that they're going to walk away with something. They need to know what's in it for them. In the case of Starbucks, the customers got better service, better product.
It got better service. Yeah, in what we see in the B2C, which is different, the people, they do participate also because sometimes they just are passionate about the brand. The 500 Fiat 500 model is an iconic brand, and they are passionate about the brand in Italy and in Europe, and so they participated to the 500 wants you. And the same for Starbucks. So you have a passion in your community, and they just want you to to get a better brand and better ideas. And also sometimes they get better, obviously, products and experiences. But no, the passion around the brand and the passion around the industry is a key determinant. So in some industries, you can leverage more your community of users, in some others a little bit less. Yeah?
We have time for one last question, and we'll make it a to-do list. So if people listening to this really want to go back and make this happen in their organization, what's the first thing that they need to do? They need to come up with 3 target partners and show it to their CEO and go, here's an idea we could execute.
Yeah,
how do you sell this in?
I think you want to build the first appetite in the organization. So I will start with 1 or 2 projects. Select 1 or 2 customers or suppliers or potential business partners. Go, run properly, execute, show the results and the return on investment, and then engage the other stakeholders in the organization to think about, in the same lines of a BSF or Italcementi or the consumer goods company that we have seen in the last slide, how you build this capability in the organization for ongoing innovations through co-creation.
An example of success is a great place to start.
Exciting opportunities. Mark, Alessandro, thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. I'm sorry that we're out of time. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I want to thank Google for Work for making this discussion possible. This concludes our presentation. Have a great day.